see. Oh well. I was experimenting with something. Now I know you guys can hear me loud and clear. I'm becoming something of an old hand at these now. So good morning, everybody. We still have a minute. So even though it's my open mic for well, I don't even have that minute anymore. Clock says it's 9:45 now. So good morning once again. The early birds. I see I got quite a number of you already here. So let's start with the week that was. You know, when I started the week that was, it was essentially one to help me ease into the morning's preoccupation, whatever that might be from week to week. And it was also to help me use the events of the past week, as I've said repeatedly, as a window for us to see the kind of country that we live in. In the week that was, multiple things happened that came directly out of the Osun State gubernatorial election. And because all of you are focused at this moment on the 2027 elections, that election opens up a whole big window. In fact, it tore down a wall and it has brought to life multiple issues, none of which are new, but a lot of which are just being highlighted because of the season we're in. One of the first things I need us to get very clear is this. Neutrality is a choice. If you're a Nigerian celebrity and you elect to be non-aligned, uninvolved with the struggle for the liberation of Nigeria, make no mistake about it, is a liberation struggle. That's another. But the reality in front of all of us should let us. This is not a pro-democracy struggle. It is a liberation struggle. So if you have a voice in Nigeria, even though you are not one of those who used to speak but who no longer talk, even though you're not one of them, you know, the traditional class of Nigerian critics who suddenly become very comfortable with the evils that Tinubu and his regime and the APC represent. Even though you are not one of those, we've come to accept that Tinubu has brought light and he has revealed people for exactly whom they've always been, because nobody changes, especially in old age. People are merely revealed. Tinubu has revealed just exactly how subjective the truth is in our country. So no problem. Let's assume that those men and women have played their season and they are in the departure lounge of life, as we all are. If you draw breath, you qualify to die. If you are a year old, you're already old enough. A day old, you're already old enough to die. That is the reality. But most of the persons that we would love to blame for the institutional failings of the Nigerian people are men in their and women in advanced years. Let me deal with today's men and women who do have voices. Olaiya Igwe elected to support somebody, and out of commitment, he stripped himself naked and he went to pray for what he believed in. God answered his prayer. Or maybe it was Satan that answered his prayer, but his prayer was answered. The person he prayed for is the president of Nigeria praying on all of us today. So now that we have found ourselves in this situation where the president of Nigeria is praying on all of us and some people prayed him into office, and Olaiya is merely an example. The point I am making is this. What Davido proved in Osun is that influence, real influence, belongs in the hand largely of those we call celebrities in Nigeria, whether those be the ones who are in the creative industries, who are acting, those in sport, is not disconnected from reality when you consider the fact that Yeye Bello hired footballers to endorse his moribund attempt at the presidency in 2022-2023. I was contacted and I have the proof. I never responded to them. Point is this: people have voices. If you elect to be silent, it is a choice to side with evil. When you see evil and you elect to be silent, you have made a choice. So let's stop with all these I'm neutral, I'm only an actor, I'm only an actress. You're seeing evil and we're all living inside this system together. And you and your children will benefit from the evil in one way or the other. It was Justice Bunza. Just in this last week, I read, he's a judge. I believe in the Kebbi State Judiciary. He was kidnapped. A justice. So nobody is immune from this madness that we are all mollycoddling in one way or the other. So if you are trading off this by your silence, Davido proved one way or the other, we can deal with the nuances. You have a voice, use it. Stop mollycoddling evil, or you become complicit in it. All of you, all of you, from whether you are talking Burna Boy, whether you are talking Whiskey, whether you are talking Olamide, whether you are talking about our footballers, like whoever you are, you have a voice and you have a duty to speak. Your silence renders you complicit in the evil that has overtaken all of us. In that week, I ran into a clip of Bishop Onoyekon, was it Cardinal Onoyekon now? The important thing is that amongst the many things he said in that interview, he was outside a church premises. He was in his canonical garb. And he said, at least we should thank God that people are not kept in dungeons in Nigeria as they are done in other African countries. I'm sorry, I have to disagree. With all due respect, sir. There are persons kept in dungeons in Nigeria, and it is only because, God forbid, that you have had occasion to go there. There are persons kept in dungeons in Nigeria by, in most cases, the force of law. El Rufai is a despicable human being. But at the end of the day, strip away the niceties of the legalese. He's in a dungeon because the law has kept him there. What kind of bail do you grant a man that even you granting the bail condition, you know he's not going to be able to fulfill it? That is a form of a dungeon. There is Mashango. Mashango is in a DSS dungeon. All he did was declare himself an Hausa man and refuse the lie of a Hausa Fulani ethnicity. That is the totality of his sin. And if he has done any other thing wrong, why hasn't he been charged to court? That was in this week that was the series of evil that you see Nigeria opening the gate for. In the week that was, I thank God for that title. Do not die in their war. If it ever required further adumbration, trust me, I saw it in the week that was. There was Davido right there, and Uncle Wicked. And there was the dancing dons showing the Capone his certificate of returns. All of them were dancing on the graves of those who died in that election. All of them. They were all dancing on the graves of the dead. But the unfortunate thing about this is that the victims are busy congratulating themselves when you can see very clearly that those for whom you bleed, those for whom you develop hatred for, care nothing about you. When I say do not die in their war, I'm not counseling cowardice. I am saying that you should be able to identify what is in your own enlightened selfish interest so that you do not become pawns in other people's games. And that is what the Nigerian has been. Pawns in people's games. We've been pawns in the games played by our local warlords, the ruiners of Nigeria, and even more stupidly, we have been pawns in the games played by America, played by the Arabs, played by the Chinese. We've just been pawns in everybody's games. The Americans are busy playing you up. They'll release Tinubu's record tomorrow or the day after that. They've been releasing it for years and they have never released it. If anything, they've actively covered it, collaborated. Now, releasing his record is going to be a danger to people's to his life or whose life. He's already a danger to our own lives. It was in 2023, I was in DC and I was asked to give a speech somewhere in DC at an event. And I did say very clearly at the time that America promotes evil in Nigeria and that they are the ones largely responsible for the evil that has overtaken us. But when I say these things, I come across to some people as some kind of extremist. I love America. I travel there. It's a beautiful country. But American interest is American interest. Nigerian interest has never been defined. Our interest is to constantly be a place for Western people, the Western world to harvest brains, a place for them to take raw material. We beneficiate nothing. If you took one yam and you cut it up and you fry it for sale, if you bought that yam for 1,000 naira, you probably make 10,000 naira from frying it. That is the value chain we lose in all of our natural resources that are taken out raw. And the world is happy that our systems are unstable as long as we're stable enough to export both our human and natural resources. When are we going to look to ourselves for our own salvation? These are the questions that agitate my mind constantly when I see the many idiots who were busy siding Israel against Iran, describing Iran as the terrorist country, when you should look around and ask yourself who actually exports terrorism to Nigeria. Who? But that's another story for another day. I merely came there so that you see when they tell you they love you, America is exporting democracy, rule of law, structures, law and order, but he exports madness into our own country. So those of you who are waiting for America to rescue you, save you from Tinubu, you are waiting for Godot. I know some of you haven't read it sufficiently to understand that. Yorubas will say, Arodon, you've been sent on a fool's errand. Nobody is coming to save me and you. Me and you, they see us, whether you are Igbo, Yoruba, Kurokuru, Kakakaka, whatever you are, you're just Nigerians. Vacuous idiots who cannot identify what is selfish interest. That is how the world sees me and you. They just see the black flesh, and all you are persons who have proven themselves incapable of managing their God-given blessings. That is all you are in the eye of the world. If you doubted it, think about it. They picked up before Maduro was Noriega. Now Nigeria, they are protecting information because their agent is your president. America owes me and you nothing. But me and you, we owe ourselves, we owe our children, we owe posterity the duty to liberate ourselves. In the week that was, campaign was said to have commenced. I wish everyone campaigning, I wish them the very best. With Tinubu and the APC campaign, posterity and past records suggest nothing of the sort. They have enough talks. They will use the police, they'll use the army, they'll use everything and anything but logic because they have none to offer. Those of you waiting, they're waiting for Godot. Once again, they found more fake agencies, I'm told. When you have a fake system, a fake constitution. You would have fake institutions. And that is why we are in this fake country that we have built together. I would only end the week that was on one note. Free the Chimasango. If he has committed any crime, charge him to court. Hmm? Charge him to court. That was in the week. That was everybody. It's a brand new week. Good morning to those of you who are just joining us. We had fun in the last 15 minutes. I've been enjoying the sound of my own voice, and we've been traveling around in the week that was. It's a brand new week. You remember that we started this series, Tiptoeing Around Nigeria. We started in the north, and then we traveled to the Middle Belt. And then we visited Ala Igbo last week. And today, we're back in my home. Let me first of all establish my bona fide, because I know a lot of idiots who have been busy spending time disseminating lies. And don't worry, that's Nigeria announcing itself. So NEPA took light and NEPA is restoring light. So don't worry, have no fear. No bombs are dropping. We are not in Tehran. It's not Afghanistan. I'm in Lagos. And at least I have light. So they are announcing it. So once again, good morning. That was NEPA announcing itself as well. They don't announce themselves when they leave, it's when they come. So they tell me they are back. So welcome back, NEPA. And welcome back to all of you as well. So as I was saying before, I was rudely interrupted by my darling NEPA. We've been around, and this time around, we're now in Yorubaland, and I would like to establish my bona fide. Sufficient number of fools have engaged themselves with my provenance. Some of them would even tell you, oh, his mother is Igbo, or this one is Igbo, or that one is Igbo, in an attempt to explain why I am perhaps the black sheep of the family. But that's a lie. I'm not the black sheep. I'm just the sheep of the family that has a microphone in front of me and is able to speak the mind of vast majority of Yoruba persons. So do not consider me an aberration. I am the norm. I'm just the one who is blessed sufficiently not to be dependent on the evil people who are governing Yoruba land today for my daily bread. And because I'm not dependent on them for my daily bread, I am able to speak. And because I'm also, thanks to God, painfully familiar with my mortality, I am also not afraid to speak. But there are multiple persons whose sentiments are echo and who daily walk up to me to let me know that they support and believe in what I am doing. Let me be clear. My father, Olufemi Farotimi, was from Ilejem. What do they call it? Ilefaro Alapata. Now get something clear. I grew up with my mother's family, and my mother is from Fiditi. Her father is from Ileolukole. The mother from Ileotun. Let's be very clear. I am an Ijesha man, grounded in the Oyo traditions. I am not one of those susceptible to the stupid blackmail of the Yoruba Konu Brigade who will seek to delegitimize my voice so that I would appear to be some outlier who does not speak for the mainstream Yoruba. I am a Yoruba man to the core. So first of all, get that clear. Now, if I would tiptoe around other people's land out of respect for their sensibilities, out of respect, so that it will be easier for them to hear the painful truths that I had to say to them. Of one thing, I am not going to tiptoe around in my father's house, and Yoruba land is my father's land. Èmi lọmọ Faro abánijá má jẹ̀bi ẹni nílé Faro alápàtà ní Mẹ̀sílẹ̀. At this point, we will tell ourselves some brutal truths. And it is important. But I am not here to cause offense. I am here so that we might reason together and come to a clear understanding of of exactly how did we get to where we are and how do we come out of here, because this is not a desirable place to be. Our fathers will say, bọ́mọ ìyá bá bára wọn wọlé tí wọ́n jáde tí wọ́n ń rẹ́rìn wọn ò bára wọn sọ ètò ń jò tọrọ lọ́bẹ̀ ni. When siblings gather together and they leave the part of that gathering smiling, is because they have failed to tell themselves the truth. I will tell you some truths today. Some of them you may not like, but the beauty of the truth is that it is self-sustaining. Even though you may not like it, it does not change the nature of the truth. And the nature wins always. So quarrel with the truth if you must. But here is where I want us to start. There was something I came across during the course of the week. You know, I regularly post my memories. So a memory came up on the 18th, it's dated the 18th of August, 2023. So it is a 3-year-old memory. It came up during the course of this week. I'll quote it extensively. It says, I have found an abiding idiocy as I have observed my people, a belief that the public good might come out of what they have universally acknowledged to be evil, myopic and self-serving, an error imposed by their willful subjectification of the truth. You see all that Dogon Turenchi? Let me tell you what it is saying. That when a people find the grace to subjectify the truth, which means that what you know to be true, somebody is a thief, you know that the person is a thief, but you allow the thief to go unchecked because it's your brother, it's your friend, it's your tribesman, you worship in the same church, or you are in the same mosque, or you are in the same lady in the secret societies. For whatever reason, you allowed the truth to become subjective. The space. Navigate the land of the Yorubas and be able to place the issues in context. It is important that we go back in time. Nigeria is a recent aberration, as aberrations go. Nigeria came about in truth in 1960, because without the agreement that bettered it, it wouldn't have been. It would never have been. Or if a nation had emerged, it might have been sets of nations. So we need to go back in time. Who were the Yorubas before the colonial tragedy? I think that is one of the things that we need to get clear. There were no Yorubas before the colonial tragedy. There were Ijeshas, there were Oyos, there were Ijebus, there were the Ekos. Ibadan was not camp, but you could speak in terms of the Ibadans. You could speak of the Egbas. You could speak of the Owus. You could talk about the Ekitis, about the Okun people. Yorubas, as you know it today, did not exist. We had a common ancestry and we all reference that, Ile-Ife. But we didn't have a Yoruba nation in the sense that we have today. The fact that prior to our colonial experience, we were engaged in multiple wars, internecine warfare amongst ourselves, and the wars against the Fulanis on our northern border. The reality is that we were disparate. But the British came. Before the British came, we had defeated the Fulanis at the Jalumi War. So it was essentially our own wars that the British came to end for us. And by the time the British came, of course, their own love for indirect rule system that was already in place. We had a highly complex system already in place before the British came, and they just layered on top of that. And our colonial experience, it wasn't as brutal as it was for the Igbos, who had to be pacified. Pacified means brought under hill across, and the Niger Delta, the entirety of what is today known as South, Southeast, even the Midwest. Those were places where there were brutal colonial military action. But in the Southwest, quote and unquote, we were spared most of these, except you counted the wars in Lagos, the British intervention in the Kitoye Kosoko Wars, the wars against the Jebus to ensure British access into the hinterland. Reality is that we were largely spared that. And there was quickly a lot of collaborations between the traditional rulership and the British, punctuated, of course, by events as the one led by punitive tax regime that came with British rulership. Other than this, everything was hunky-dory, but some form of normalcy existed. And this was how it was until we entered into the 40s. By the time we entered the 40s, you had the Igbos having taken preeminent position, not just the Igbos, even the Ibios. There were clear understanding amongst these ethnicities because they came into contact with the British much earlier as a collective than we did. But what happened was that in the 40s, ethnic nationalist sentiment started brewing. And when ethnic nationalist sentiment began to brew, you must understand that while you speak in terms of the Igbo nation, you already had the Igbo by this time. Around 1945, it was already functional. It was already functional. You had people like, as I referred to, that Onyema was already speaking in terms of supremacist, in those terms, in supremacist terms. So, of course, most of these persons speaking in supremacist terms were in Lagos, where the Yoruba elite were also present. The Yoruba elite, mind you, you could be speaking of a Yoruba elite in a place like Lagos because it was a cosmopolitan blend, but you couldn't really speak in truth in terms of a Yoruba elite when you looked globally within the Yoruba space. It still remained what it was. Ibadans, Oyos, Ekitis, Jeshas, Akures. Everybody had Ekitis, everybody had their distinct personality. Do not forget that Yorubas were coming from almost 100 years of multiple warfare of one sort or the other that had fractured their land even more. They had enslaved each other, sold each other into slavery. So you were at a point where Yoruba, today's Yoruba, which was not in existence, were largely open to the to nationalist influences and were in large numbers in the NCNC. And it was of Yoruba nationalism. It led to the formation of the Egbe Omo Odudua. I believe that was in 1945 or thereabout in England, because they recognized the need to set up a Yoruba nationalist front as a counterbalance to the, let me say, the Igbo hegemony that was already being announced by the pronouncement of Dadi, which was later unfortunately echoed by Nnamdi Azikiwe himself around 1949 in Aba. I referenced this last week. It was in the midst of this that the Yoruba ethnic nationality began to arise. When Egbe Omodudua was formed, the bulk of his members were members of the NCNC. The political active ones were already in the NCNC when it was formed. So it's not like a thing with the formation of a political party. was what it said it was, Oduduwa Descendants Union. It was meant to birth cultural consciousness of the people in a central Yoruba identity, separate and distinct from the fractious identity that those referred to as Yoruba today had embraced. The coastal dwelling Yorubas speak distinct variants of the language, and they saw themselves at that time as a distinct group who were even more closer aligned to the Ijaws and the Shekiris than they were to the mainstream Yorubas. But when Egbe Omodudua came, it came with the direct and distinct declared intention to create a Yoruba identity, to foster cooperation amongst Yorubas. And that was what they did. By the time Awolowo elected to start the action group, there is my leader, who is today now late, Chief Ayo Adebajo, who was one of the founding organizing secretaries. Or rather, let me just say, in the early years, he was one of the organizing secretaries of the action group. Even some of our living leaders, like Chief Shuko Shonibare, the contemporary argument is that the Egbe Omodudua did not set out to become the action group. But I will go as far as to say that the Egbe Omodudua transmuted, even though members of the Egbe were NCNC member, it more or less transmuted into the action group. But with one caveat that must be added, so that history must be properly recorded. It was intended as a political party to embrace the totality of Nigeria. But because of the elections of 1951, which were already afoot, it focused on the Western region, and it brought in members who were outside Yorubaland but were part and parcel of the Western region. And that was why you had people like Okoro Dudu, who I believe was an Ishekiri man at the outset. He was part of the formation of the action group. You had Igodalo. He was there at the formation of the action group. And there were a few others who were part of the action group conferences in Akure before the 1951 election into the Western Regional Assembly. We will come there because there is a myth that must be destroyed today, and that is the myth of carpet crossing. It is a lie from the pit of hell. Let me repeat myself. It is a lie from the pit of hell that the NCNC and Azikiwe won the election in the Western region, and then people cross-carpeted. I say that on the authority of my own research. I took the time to read. If you must teach, you must learn. I took the time to read. And the book I read that provided the primary authority was a book written by Chief Ganiu Daudu. It's readily available to those who care to read. And it offered multiple references from contemporary newspapers of the time, particularly Daily Times, which is universally acknowledged as being the journalistic authority of the day. It showed clearly that before the election, the list of action group candidates were already published. The Colonial Information Secretary demanded this. It was only the action group that submitted its own. The NCNC did not even care to submit one. Do not forget that in the lead up to this election, Azikiwe had already voluntarily announced a 5-year ban on himself because he believed the Nigerian people were not ready for the revolutionary actions that he was recommending to be undertaken to gain self-governance for Nigeria. So at this time, in 1951, he had voluntarily withdrawn from politics, from electoral politics. So it was in the last minute that he allowed himself to be persuaded to jump into the race. Now, on the list submitted by the Action Group to the Colonial Information Secretary before the election, Action Group had 38 members clearly elected out of, I think, a 72 member House of Assembly. And that is without prejudice to the fact that there were independent parties and independent candidates. The Ibadan Progressive Union, for instance, had 6 members. Of the 6, only Adegoke Adelabu, who was not even an NCNC member, they had an agreement that they will affiliate themselves with another party, not that they would obliterate their own identity as independent, but they would identify with the party, any party that wins the majority of that they can support to form a government in promotion of their own identified group interest. You had the Otu Edo as well, an independent party, an independent group of Edo people who are aligned with the Omonoba, who are also running as independent. The Otu Edo legislators who became aligned only after the election. These were persons NCNC presumed would support and be aligned with them, and they never published a list of candidates. This is very important to note. The Action Group published one, and the list the Action Group published. Remember, you publish the name of your candidates. 38 were already Action Group members. This is before you start dealing with any business of independent candidates that you would now be asking to join the party. So how we come about this cross-carpeting myth is a classic example of how the lie has been allowed to travel unchecked, and how it is easier for people to embrace lies in place of the truth, because sometimes the lies pander to our prejudices, and it is comfortable for us to embrace, sometimes even more comfortable than the truth. But let me put it to rest once and for all today. Once and for all, there was no cross-carpeting. It is all propaganda. Propaganda. When I'm done with today's lecture, I'm going to post the back cover of the book, and I'll speak with the Daniel Daudu family. I'm sure they should be able to have copies of the book available for others. The most important thing is that the book merely points you in the direction of where you'll find the truth. The bulk of what the book referenced, you'll find in the Daily Times archive. These archives are there at the National Archive. They are there in every public library in Nigeria. You'll get it in Unilag, you'll get it in UI. So I don't think this should be something to engage us, but it is important that we dealt with it, because in tiptoeing around Ala Igbo, I did point out something that I will eventually nail down when we are dealing with the larger thing. The important thing is people have embraced historical grievances that have no basis in truth, and it has led to a lot of conflicts in real time that we are still paying for today. So we need to lay some of these things to sleep, bury them once and for all, so that we may be able to navigate the future better. That lie cemented a schism, and it is part of what has fractured the South. And it is in the fracturing of the South that a lot of evil has been allowed to move unchecked, because persons have been trading grievances instead of trading and finding common ground. In the NCNC Mobolaje coalition ensured the defeat of the AG in the Ibadan elections. People need to understand that Yoruba politics has never been monolithic. Persons have always found basis to disagree elderly based on principle and sometimes selfish interest. But the one thing that has never been is that one person will presume to speak on behalf of the Yoruba to the silence of every other Yoruba person, unlike the one that we have with us today. Yoruba nationalism and ethnic consciousness is not something that grew in a vacuum. It is a consequence of the lack of citizenship in Nigeria. The group consciousness that we all cling to. Oh, I'm a Yoruba man. Oh, I speak for the Yoruba local. The aggregation of citizenship rights in pursuit of personal interest. This is what has happened, and as it has happened to the Igbos, as it has happened to the Fulanis, as it has happened to the Ijaws, it has also befallen the Yorubas. Today, a people that once found common cause and pursued group interest, a people who assured that it was the common interest of the people that constantly governed the choices of the collective, have today become as feudalized as any other. Today in Yorubaland, you have the ruination of religion. A people who once couldn't care anything about how you elected or you elect to worship or not worship God have today become very invested in exactly how you bow to God or refuse to bow to God. The Yoruba Christian now feels that it is his duty to be clearing the sacred groves. The Yoruba Muslim cannot even decide which one he is first. Is he a Muslim or is he a Yoruba person? In pursuit of his identity, he's become schizophrenic. The Yoruba Muslim is probably the most dangerous of all Muslims in Yoruba land today. And I say this clearly because when you have a situation where it becomes important to identify who you are in a place devoid of citizenship, and you have persons who are arguing in pursuit of interests that are inimical to that of the group to which they hold their primary allegiance, persons are speaking in terms of Sharia law in Yoruba land. Persons are speaking today as though they hold their allegiance in terms of Islamic leadership to a man sat in Shakoto, instead of realizing the fact that long before there was a jihad, there was Islam in Yoruba land. The likes of Chief Lateef Adegbite, they're gone. And with them, that goes the independence of the Yoruba Muslim. Largely today, Yoruba Muslims have become subject to Fulani clerics, conflating Yoruba interest with Fulani interest. The Fulanis have always hidden behind religion to hide their agenda, and that agenda has found full flare in Yoruba land today. If you speak today, it's not about what is in Yoruba interest for a lot. It's about promotion of Islamic or Islamist interest. The conflation of this is the biggest problem that confronts and challenges the identity that was built as a bulwark in the 50s. So today, you have confused persons strolling around. The role of the Abrahamic religion in Yoruba land is despicable. in the extreme. Yoruba identity constantly under assault. And when this is not under assault, it is appropriated and pressed in pursuit of personal selfish interest. All of a sudden, Oro is busy making noise in Lagos State. The most cosmopolitan of the Yoruba states has suddenly become a battle during election time. Even Yorubas who do not agree are suddenly enemies. Odale, Omale, all kinds of derogatory terms simply because we do not agree with the agenda of those who believe that we must all be feudalized and brought under heel, subjected to the whims of men. Where is the group interest? Where are those group interests that are used to propel Yoruba action? Where are they? Who are the persons who are speaking in protection of Yoruba interest? Where are the Obas? Obas are largely government appointees who are busy speaking in pursuit of government contracts, endorsement, and largesse. Where are the ones speaking for their people? How many Obas still have voices in Yoruba land today? How many? I was listening to Abat Ogunde Yoruba Ronu before I started today's broadcast. And the more I listen to it, the more I realize that there is a urgency that must be fulfilled. There is a need to transcribe those words and then translate them to English language for today's youth to hear, so that you have clarity as to exactly the level of sellout that are before back. These things came and we again must travel by. Immediately after the first coup, remember before this happened, Obafemi Awolowo was already in prison. One of the stated goals of the coup by those who were involved in the coup was that they were looking to free Obafemi Awolowo and install him in. Whether you believe that or not is another story for another day, and it's not my preoccupation today. Important thing is that by the time the second coup came, Awolowo was freed. He came out of that and he was made the Minister of Finance, and the second, more or less like the number two in the government. At least the titular, of course, they had to play it up. Civil war. Yorubas must be seen to be on board against their Igbo brothers. The Igbos have a saying. They say when brothers fight, strangers inherit their father's heart. Obi becomes the home of the stranger. So if there was already a rivalry, it was cemented by the formation of Gowon's government. Because now, Azikiwe is in exile. Obafemi Awolowo is the Minister of Finance, the most consequential office in the land. Nigeria was at war, and more propaganda must now be entrenched. And Awolowo was right there. And there is very little that can be said sometimes in defense of some of the things that took place. All is fear in war. People may hate to hear that, but that is the reality. All is indeed fear in war. Obafemi Awolowo, as the Minister of Finance, signed off on the policy. Rightly, I would have done the exact same thing. He signed off on the policy not to allow food to cross into Biafra. And I'll explain myself. Combatants take preeminence when it comes to distribution of food. And what was happening was a situation where shipment of food by Caritas was being hijacked constantly by the soldiers. The civilians were not getting these rations. We're talking war. I'm not justifying it, but we're already at war. Same thing. And I'm sure if positions were reversed, how do you feed soldiers you are warring with? The children were collateral damage. Unfortunately, that is how war is. We can look at this event with the benefit of hindsight and pass judgment, but it was wartime. Nobody was targeting children, but it was decided that food must not be allowed to cross into enemy territory. That is normal. Every war in the world, you see the Red Cross setting on the UNCHR, that the United Nations Commission for Refugees. They are somewhere on Awolowo Road. They will set up tents. They are already in Nigeria because we have refugees in Nigeria again. I'm sure you know that the last time the Air Force bombed a place where they said there was a Boko Haram market, it is wartime. The important thing we must note is that this was not targeted at children, even though the children became the victims. It was targeted at soldiers. It was targeted at a zone. It didn't discriminate. To make matters worse, after the Civil War came the 20-pound policy. Obafemi Awolowo again was sat as the vice chairman and he was the minister for the economy, finance minister. So of course, 20-pound policy, justified, of course, as they will say, was wartime. Banking records had been destroyed. Banks had been looted. But they did say, if your banking records are not destroyed and you have proof of your deposit, you got your money back. And that's why people like Alex Ekweme are held up as persons who got their money back. That was the rule. A lot of people became collateral damage. The important